welcome to the Red Leaf Card, your home for Canadian soccer news and views. My name is Jacob, and today we're going to be talking about the new expansion teams for League One Ontario. But first, here's your fixtures rundown. In the Canadian Premier League, Valor FC defeats Forge FC 2-1. Calgary FC defeats Halifax Wanderers 3-1 at Victoria of the BC Derby. Pacific FC draws with Vancouver FC 1 goal apiece. And York United drawing with Atletico Ottawa with 2 goals apiece. And also in the Northern Super League, AFC Toronto defeating Vancouver Rise 7-0 with a large blowout and making them the first team to clinch the playoff spot in the first season of the Northern Super League. Congrats to AFC Toronto for clinching that playoff spot. But seeing those leagues in action, League One Ontario making some great news for their upcoming season with adding 2 new teams for League One Ontario, but they're going to be starting in League Two Ontario. So the announcement that they're having of their 2 new teams coming out of Richmond Hill is Richmond Hill SC. And from League One Ontario, they've been having some of the license for some of the under 20 or reserve teams in League One Ontario. But now League One Ontario feels like they're the candidates to say, here you go. You feel like a great candidate for League One Ontario to get a full licensing to have a senior team for League One Ontario. And congrats to Richmond Hill SC to being part of the member for League One Ontario to actually starting fresh to League Two Ontario with a senior team in the way. So who's the second candidate that got in the League Two Ontario is a real shocker that some of the fans out there and a lot of people kind of love the place that they are in, that the place it is in is Kingston. As known, the team that is in Kingston called Kingston Sentinels FC, which was the first team that was announced to being expanded for 2026 in League One Ontario. They will be alongside with Richmond Hill SC for the 2 new teams. So getting to know about Kingston Sentinels FC is actually surprising what the team is. As known, the ones that are running Kingston Sentinels is actually the same owners that wanted to campaign for the Canadian Premier League team called Victory Group Ventures. They were trying to campaign to making a stadium out there in Kingston, and they're not holding back to getting a Canadian Premier League team. As known, they're still doing that campaign and probably trying to still do that for 2027. And lot of fans out there are looking, and Kingston looks like a great place to start for an expansion team. But you look at Canadian Premier League, they're still going out there to try to find a team in Quebec. There's a lot of investors trying to get an expansion team out there, but looking at the owners getting that League One Ontario team starting from League Two is a great start for them. And right now you see them right now at what they want. They're still trying to make a proper stadium for the team. That's a good sign for the ownership that they want. But I've seen some bad ownership that always say they want to go all the way to the Canadian Premier League. Like, for example, Electric City FC, who were also campaigning to go all the way for the Canadian Premier League. And the reason why some of the people might be worried for ownership to go all in to say start from League One Ontario and then later try to go all for the Canadian Premier League could actually jeopardize the team itself. And Electric City FC is one of those. If you spend too much, which I think Kingston Sentinels FC might not try to do that. Seeing, like, again, Kingston, I don't see Kingston trying to do the same mistake what Electric City FC has done, spent so much money on trying to promote their team to go to the Canadian Premier League. But again, about Electric City FC, have they done was to spend so much money on players to try to win all the way, and also seen that they had to, that during the pandemic, they ruined everything for them. They didn't want to jeopardize all that. So that's how Electric City FC basically came down. And now the whole organization just basically dissolved. And a lot of fans just hope that Kingston Sentinels does not do that from the mistakes that Electric City FC actually did. So both teams, Richmond Hill SC and Kingston Sentinels, with full license, that they're going to have a female and male team. That's a big sign for them that they will be starting. And this one shows a lot of support, that a lot of fans really love that Kingston is part of League One Ontario, because as noticed, there was a previous team in Kingston called the Kingston Clippers, and you look at Richmond Hill, really old organization from 1968, and they've been part of League One Ontario in like one of the under teams or the reserve teams. It's a great sign that League One Ontario looked at Richmond Hill, a great organization to have a full licensing. And seeing how 2026 is coming, that the World Cup is going to be actually coming for next season, it might bring in more investors to come in for League League One Ontario. Not just League One Ontario. You also have probably League One BC. Probably could bring in more. There's always questions how League One BC could bring in more teams, or even Alberta, for example. But you look at, for example, how League One Quebec is right now. They're doing actually fine because they have a lot of teams. They have a lot of teams right now that are competing. And then later, you try to question, can other provinces out there get an establishment of their own leagues for League One Canada? And we hope to see that actually happen for League One Canada to expand and see the exposure for League One Canada, or even in Canada Soccer, to grow for the academies for soccer. And we see how even for kids out there that love soccer, see the action, how the World Cup in Canada sees. Also, like, you always see Canadian soccer fans, they're always hyped for the World Cup. And now you see that desperation that you want to be loving the sports. You want to see that grow, but some of them feel like it's not happening because you look at, for example, if you look at the Canadian Premier League, you don't see expansion teams. For example, Saskatchewan, or for Quebec, there's the exposure. If you don't bring teams like, for example, Quebec, you see a lot of soccer players coming out of Quebec. You usually see players coming out of Ontario. Not just those two provinces out there. You also see from BC. But it is always the question, should there also be another one in BC? And a lot of always says they always want to pick Kelowna, but it's always been that rumor that Kelowna would be there, even including in Ontario, Windsor. That is always the question mark for those. And in Quebec, it's always question mark if Laval will be the expansion team to be announced. So a lot of question marks coming out for who could be the expansion team for the Canadian Premier League. But it's always to hear if James Johnson, the CEO for the Canadian soccer business, to announce what is going to happen for the Canadian Premier League. And that's full time of the Red Leaf Card. You could follow us on X, Spotify, and YouTube. I'm your host, Jacob, subbing out.